A very warm welcome to everyone for today's webinar, Go Beyond with Sales Training. Today's speaker is Amit Garg, founder and director of Upside Learning Solutions. Amit has been involved in the workplace learning domain for over 20 years. He is passionate about improving organizational performance through better learning solutions and consults organizations on resolving training and learning challenges. Amit also leads the sales team at Upside Learning that reaches out to the biggest corporations across the world. I will now hand it over to Amit to take today's session forward. Amit, over to you.
Thanks, Mustafa, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar on going beyond with sales training. So we have quite a packed schedule for the next 1 hour, and I hope I can have about 10 minutes in the end for question and answer. So here's broadly the agenda that we have. We'll talk a little bit, about 5 minutes, about Upside Learning. We'll also dive into the state of L&D in general, and more specifically in the state of sales training based on the research from various different bodies. We'll also briefly look at what's the landscape looking like for sales and business in general, and spend most of our time on how do we make sales training work. And finally, as I said, hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes in the end for any Q&A. But if you have any questions in between, please do drop in the chat window, and we'll see periodically if we can pick them up. All right, so very quickly about Upside Learning. We have been in business for about 16 years, delivering digital learning solutions. We just completed 16 actually in April. We have about 120 people, and over the years have delivered more than 20,000 hours of e-learning and other sorts of blended learning solutions. Some of our clients that we have been very privileged to work with, consult them, and provide real cutting-edge solutions over the years. And in the process, we've been very fortunate to win some awards along the way from training industry, from LearnX, Brandon Hall, and other portals like e-learning industry. But the one that really holds place of pride is the Great Place to Work recognition that we got last year. So that definitely makes us feel very, very proud. All right, so I don't know if you've been following us on social media, other places, but we have been, we've had this Go Beyond campaign going on. You call it an initiative or a campaign, and it's been on for almost a year now. It's essentially a nudge to ourselves and to our clients and prospects to go beyond ticking the boxes and do something better with their learning and training initiatives. We've kind of as first segment of that campaign, we focused on compliance training, and in that we released an ebook that was compiled by our team. We had sponsored an e-learning webinar on the topic, and also sponsored a research report towards maturity on the same topic. In the next segment, we have been focusing on the sales training and sales enablement, where we've already had a webinar with the learning industry, the Aggregate Group. We recently had a research report sponsored with ATD, which is sales onboarding, launching productivity. And hopefully in a few weeks' time, we would have an ebook on Go Beyond with sales training that we available. The third segment in this series is going to be on data in L&D, which is becoming ever so useful, and we can really work with data now if we apply in a great manner. So if you want to be notified of that, I would recommend subscribing to our newsletters or social channels, and we would promptly get you the news. Where we stand as Upside Learning in terms of our experience in sales training, in the last 2 years, we just took a quick number check on our work. So about 25% of our work in the last 2 years has been in the sales domain or related to sales training. It has been across industries, IT, pharma, healthcare, BFSI, retail, automotive, and across topics, selling skills, product training, sales management skills, company knowledge and industry knowledge that is directed at the salespeople. So, and we have a few polls lined up for you, 3 of them, 2 of them in quick succession. Let's start with the first one. So that's just about upside learning, and we're finished with that. So let's know a little bit about our participants and attendees today. Which function do you belong to? Is it sales, which is either sales or sales enablement, which is part of sales, or sales enablement, which is independent, not part of sales, not part of HR or L&D, talent development, including L&D, human resources, or any other function. Mustafa, you could go ahead and launch it. Thank you. And if everybody can take a quick minute to key in your responses. I hope everybody has keyed in. Mustafa, would you like to please share the results?
Sure, Amit.
Fantastic. All right. So we have sales or sales enablement or talent development. Most people are there, almost 50%. And then either sales enablement or sales enablement with sales. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. And quickly, we have the next one as well, which is the next poll, which is what's your number one priority in next 12 months? Is it sales training content, creation, transformation, whatever, customer facing sales tools, sales onboarding, sales coaching, or analytics? Again, Mustafa, if you could please launch the poll. Okay, let's give it a quick minute. Of course, here I believe, Mustafa, you can have multiple responses as well, or is it just multiple choice?
There's a multiple choice.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So you can choose one of these. Let's see which is your topmost priority. All right. Hopefully everybody has keyed in. If you can quickly show the results, Mustafa. All right. Sales training content and sales onboarding. All right. Great. I would believe that, yeah, content is going to become more and more important going forward. We'll probably see reasons for that in this presentation as well. So let's start with, what's the state of L&D itself. Here's some numbers from various different research that we have been collating these from. So this is from Towards Maturity 2007 study. And they say about 27% organizations look for evidence in the form of behavior change. That's just 27%. 37% training leads to learning transfer. Now this is from CEB research. All right, so the second one is from CEB research, which says 37% learning transfer happens. So again, that's not a very high number. The third data point we have is only 6% L&D budgets lead to any behavior change. This is from CalCap at Learning Technologies 2019. That's a miserable number, only 6%. And of course, consequently, only 8% executives think L&D has measurable impact. So this is, essentially telling on what L&D has been doing and achieving over the years. And it is definitely not a great sign. And it needs to change, and a lot needs to be done. Let's quickly move to what's the state of sales training. This is from the ATD research, which is fairly recent, 2019. And we picked up some of the key data points that they have shared. Responsibility for sales training. Who has that responsibility for sales training in an organization? And this is, as you can see, the responses are, or the options here are exactly the ones that we put up as options in the first poll. So sales for sales enablement teams hold the maximum amount. The second is talent development team, then human resources and sales enablement, and others. Then you have extent to which training helps meet sales goals. And this is very interesting to me. Very high extent, 11% people. 31% saying high extent. So if I just total that up, that's 42%. I think there is a mismatch here in the numbers. This is about 101% if you were trying to total them up. And that's what we saw in the ATD slides as well. But maybe, there's a percentage here and there, or maybe a 0.5 got added up somewhere. But coming to the key point, which is 42% are either saying very high extent or to an high extent, training is helping meet sales goals. That's a pretty decent number, especially if you compare it with just 8% executives think L&D is making a difference, to that extent. Of course, this may be different researchers from different, research bodies at a different point of time. So surely this is not really apples to apples, but it does give a little bit of an indication that maybe sales training overall is doing a little better than a general L&D. Here's our third and the last poll for you. What are the top barriers to delivering effective sales training? So I'll just list out the options: salespeople not being held accountable, inability to tie sales training to sales performance, scheduling conflicts and time restraints, not viewing it as important by the salespeople, and business sales managers not viewing it as important. All right, thanks, Mustafa. If you can all quickly take a minute and put in your votes, choices, and let's see what comes up. Mustafa, if you can please show the results. Inability to tie sales training to sales performance. Excellent. All right, so I'll just close this and see what the ATD report says. It actually says the top barriers to in their survey they found was salespeople not being held accountable, and then the sales inability to tie in sales training to sales performance. And I think the top 2 or 3 here, if we are able to address them well, I think we can improve the efficiency of sales training quite a lot. Next we have is the landscape. This is, I'm sure you've seen this somewhere. It is not new, but just to put it as an important aspect of the landscape. I think this is about 2016 or something when Josh Bersin introduced us to the modern learner, and very specifically said that she is overwhelmed, distracted, and impatient. And this is essentially an indication of the kind of lives and the environment in which we have been working over the past few years. And maybe we can relate to this pretty much. But it may also mean that this could be even more difficult for the salespeople. You can just think of the environment in which they work. It may be a slightly more dynamic environment for salespeople. Also, then there is a huge shift in buyer behavior because of the internet over the last few years. Several studies say this, and this I've picked up from HubSpot, that 70% of buyers' journey in general is over before they talk to the salespeople. So there is no interaction with the company. People are just researching on their own, Googling it, reading your website, downloading collateral, maybe watching a webinar like this, watching recording of webinars. You don't have to give your email IDs as well for that. And various things, you could watch recordings of a trade show, talk, etc. So there could be various ways they are researching. Maybe social media, they're just watching what you are saying on social media, what stand you take on various topics, etc. A large number actually do not prefer to talk to salespeople at all. And that leaves salespeople in a very difficult situation, which essentially means they do not have they get into the sales process or in the buying journey process pretty late, So it is with the marketing that the initial or the prospect is with the marketing team in the initial stages. And that's where the sales enablement domain has really risen in the last few years. And HubSpot specifically defines it as the process, content, and technology that empower sales teams to sell efficiently at a higher velocity. And they further go on to say, there are various components of it. I would categorize it in 3, which is sales training and coaching together, enablement technology, and there's plethora of those. Actually, there's so much of technology available for sales enablement these days, and the content. And this content, mind you, is the one that we are looking at is customer facing, and not actually here, at least in this component, is not the one that you're looking for your salespeople. However, that content and any sales training that we are doing should sync up pretty well. Otherwise, for the 70% of the journey, whatever the customer is experiencing in terms of your collaterals, what you're saying, what's there on your website, and if the training is not syncing up well with that, after that, they're going to get a shock because the salespeople are going to talk about something else, which is not what they have experienced for pretty much 70% of the process that they've already gone through. So that's why that syncing up and working of the marketing and sales has, together has become so much more important. But that's really the landscape that we're looking at, and which leads us to just looking at things that can be done at our end. How do we make sales training more efficient and it works for an organization in that? And I'll let you take a moment to see if this resonates with some of you. So that's really how we see that a lot of training itself has been evaluated many a times, if not in most, at least in some organizations, the measurement criteria and the things that you want to measure have been misplaced, and that has led to a lot of suboptimal performance, as we saw. So I think the crux of the problem is actually this, for whatever we saw in terms of the state of L&D that various reports and surveys are showing. I firmly believe that if we have to change that situation, we need to start from the end, which is from the end result. What do we want to achieve? And if we kind of focus a little more on the evaluation part, which is what did we achieve? Results. Then, of course, learning evaluation, you can get into various different models, but the one that I particularly like is by Professor Robert Brinkerhoff, and his courageous training model, where the key thought is that training itself should not be subjected to evaluation. It should not be the only object of evaluation. Just like, and in a lighter vein, success of a marriage cannot be ascertained by the quality of wedding ceremony. It's just an event. There is so much more that is happening before that event, and so much more that's going to happen after that event. And so it's almost futile to just judge a whole program based on an event. And I think that's really, to me at least, is hard hitting, because this is the core point. Many a times, wherever the training may not be achieving its objectives, is this point which we miss most often. In the model that Professor Brinkerhoff has, he obviously talks about the training event, and for that, you need to provide quality learning interventions, no doubt. You use adult learning principles, to engage the learners, and provide scenario-based training that can be immediately transferable to the job. So there is very effective learning transfer. But he also says, do not lose your focus on the before, which is where you need to build the intentionality. So explain why this training program is important for the business and for the individual. And you need to get that alignment from top to bottom. And this is true for all training. And also, after the training program, we need to create an environment that supports application of learning, especially important for the line managers, because they are really responsible for that to happen. So per his model, Professor Brinkerhoff is really saying, do not focus just on the training event, also focus on the before and after. They are equally critical, if not more critical. And most trainings are actually failing because of that. So maybe a lot of us are not experienced in that before and after, focusing on that, what to do there. So let's see how we can make, or if we can utilize this or share our thoughts, what can be done specifically to sales training using this structure or model. Let's look at the before aspects. In our view, the first thing, of course, is to align with the business objectives. So you can't really hold any training which is not really aligned with the business objectives. You need to understand, the business situations are dynamic, and today we all know all too well, in the last 2 months, the world has really changed, and it's not just such big crises that really changes the business's objectives and focus. There could be smaller ones. So what are the current short-term objectives, short-term goals, and long-term objectives, long-term goals? Unless we understand that and then align what is the role of sales with that, and then look at what is the kind of training we need to create. So getting that right is super crucial. The second point is, what is it that you really want to change in terms of behavior? And I kind of repeat that statement. What do you want them to do? And this is your salespeople to do and not just know. There's a difference between knowing and doing. And especially in sales training context, you might say knowing is mostly product training and doing may be more towards skills training. And that's the crucial difference, that sometimes you may find sales training being only product training. So you give the features, you give details about all the specs, but you don't know how to really sell that. Understanding the customer's business, how to pitch it, etc. There could be so many different aspects. But we need to identify, what do you want your salespeople to do? Of course, there are two addresses here. One should have been enough. But you should not be throwing training at challenges that it can't address. It is far too easy to say, let's do training for this. But training is not meant for everything. It's not the panacea that you're looking for. In fact, there's a tool which I do believe is one of the most brilliant ones that can help you achieve this objective of identifying where will training work, or what within training should be covered. So that's action mapping. I'm sure some of you would have seen that, or a lot of you, because it's not a new thing, but still no harm in really quickly visiting it. So this is action mapping by Kathy Moore. And in fact, on her website, this actually example exists, which is about increasing widget sales. So if you have that objective and you identify that to be your goal, you need to look at what job behaviors do you need to have, or your salespeople need to reach, so that you can get to that goal. So you identify 2, 3, 4, 5 such behaviors, and then you look at, for each of those behaviors, what is the practice that you can give them so that they can perfect that behavior. So you give them more practice on the behavior that you are going to focus on. And then once you've identified that, you may have one to many, you may have many to one kind of a situation here for different behaviors. And then you identify what is the kind of information you need for each of those practice. And only the essential information for that activity is your training. In some cases, the information, which is more theoretical concepts, and the practice, both will form your training. In some cases, just this is your training, this is your practice, whichever way you want to classify. But essentially, this is what you're trying to achieve. The eyes and the hands, that's your training, and which is firmly aligned with what you want to change, or what behaviors you want to see in your salespeople. Moving on, the fourth point is involving managers. And this is where it's crucial to get buy-in from managers, not just the senior management, but also the line managers, because ultimately they are the ones who will have accountability as well as ownership of outcomes. Unless we build that, it is going to fail, because they are the ones who really support the environment in which the learning can be applied. And it's not just for the sales managers, all managers for all training. So that's the before part. When you come to the training event itself, and by definition it's called event, it may not be an event, and I'll come to that. There's a point I have captured for that. So crucial part is designing for motivation. I don't think we adults really move a finger without a purpose. There is nothing. We go to YouTube and search for stuff when we are in crisis, when we need to solve something. So there is a purpose attached to that, and then we can do a lot of things. Without that, it's very difficult. And motivation is crucial. And motivation can be lost easily. So the topic can be very motivating, but the moment you get in, and if you're not able to give them the right stuff in a format that they are able to appreciate and use, you lose them. So both motivation and engagement become crucial. I think these are great points to focus on if you're looking at motivation, that is making your training relevant. And if you have done action mapping, chances are it will be very, very relevant. Contextualized, again, if you can focus on that, Again, action mapping can lead you to this, but then you have to really deliver that kind of experience. If you're doing it through e-learning, you need to have those contextualized real life scenarios, that kind of training, which even Professor Brinkerhoff talks of. If you have that, the learning transfer is much better. You can use storytelling, whenever there is more content, especially. Storytelling works very well. It helps you or a learner tie in a lot of concepts and items together in one story. And it's easier to remember and go back. I'll just show you a few screenshots. Here's something for the retail salespeople where you have created scenarios around a new product that they had launched at that time, which is Slurpee. You have the environment looks very, very contextualized, and the scenarios created are ones that you are going to face in a retail store. Another one where we had used stories to start and give a background of where certain tools fit, then plug in the tools that we were talking of in terms of product training and how they fit in and where they will work and how do they work, etc. And the third one is video storytelling, where again retail people are being trained on how to avoid a robbery-like situation, and it's a fairly interactive video where essentially you just need to pause the video by pressing this bell and choose whatever be the option that you think is the best. So let's say I press this and I got threat and I select threat. If that was the right response or right choice, I would get points. So slightly gamified, not really gamified in the true sense, but yes, there are elements. And I think something like this involves the learners much, much better. All right, so second point here is thinking of a campaign. And this is obviously pretty different from an event, right? But here, training event is really referring to the whole training, just picking up the terms from Professor Brinkerhoff's model. So you should think of a campaign. No event per se, just one training event is going to change behaviors or bring about any sort of change. So think campaign where there is a, maybe a before the event in terms of sub elements going out, preparing people, rolling out, building excitement, etc. And then there is afterwards where you are looking at spaced learning for reinforcement, practice, even reflection. We've seen games and gamification can help in building engagement over longer duration. So if you're looking at a 3-month campaign, it is better to have some sort of mechanism which allows people to come back, right? You're not pushing them, you want them to come back, which is where gamification works really, really well. I have a few samples. This is from the compliance domain. One of the things that we did during our compliance campaign is to create a compliance whole product, which is a supporting product to maybe your compliance training events. Here you have levels like you would in any game. You kind of get some points when you roll the dice, and based on that your character moves. But most importantly, this is the crucial part of the program where you have confidence cards. A confident player would choose or go for +2, -2. A less confident one would take this. They would probably hedge themselves in some way. And that can be very meaningful data over a period of time across different things that you give to people or across the workforce, maybe across salespeople. So you will get to know what is the confidence level on different topics that your team has and where are they getting it wrong. All of that data can lead to a lot of, feeding back into the system in terms of what do you need to focus on, how do you improve that, etc. There's other, simpler game-based stuff, So, and this is something that we don't call it as a game. These are game-lets, if you like. But these are useful when you are following up. So for reinforcements, it does make sense to bring in, smaller games there, especially when you are not really imparting a lot of initial knowledge. For initial knowledge, no. For reinforcement, recapping, allowing them to apply it in a fun environment, yes, I think it makes sense. So you can even have some, gamelets like these, which can be added, and maybe they can work on mobile phones as well, like this one, which is a whole game-based solution that we are looking at, which is for warehouses. How do your customers? So let's say it's a warehouse or a voice equipment manufacturer. and you are going to sell it to the various warehouses. This game is essentially allowing you to get into your customers' shoes and optimize the revenues by using the right voice equipment. So essentially, you are learning solutioning skills for your different types of customers through the game. If you win, you're probably on the right track. You are proposing the right solutions, and hence the business is winning. So, you can possibly give practices like these if you're looking at solutioning skills that you want to develop in your teams. There is another one that we're working on, and this is very, very interesting, which is around values, and which is a pretty, in my view, very amorphous topic. It's very difficult to measure. It's easy to put up on a, on a wall, frame it and put it up in a gold plate, and everybody sees it while they go up and down in the lift or through the staircase. But it's very difficult to imbibe and see it in practice. So using concepts of, how do we form habits? How do we behave when we have common goals? How do we respond to situations where we are forced to think about and comment on? Essentially, we are trying to get that as a practice over a period of 52 weeks, where the learners are going to, practice something every week, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but the idea is that they will practice it for about 52 weeks. And we feel a solution like this could be fantastic. And something like this can pretty much work for sales related skills as well. My third point on this is leveraging expert knowledge. Sometimes it may be difficult to extract, if I may use the word, the real knowledge which is residing, with your subject matter experts. They may not be going out and selling sometimes, but they have the knowledge. Or it may be with your best salespeople. So it makes sense to leverage their knowledge. You could possibly, so this is an example of something we did for a client where they sent out, just the video of the expert, and we picked that up. Initially, we showed his, a few frames, and then converted the whole thing to animated thing, because a monologue could be really difficult to grasp it. So here you have now, all the senses that you are utilizing. You're reinforcing the concept through text. You have animations which are supporting what's being said, and you're obviously listening to the expert. So there is value. Most value is, of course, because you are having an expert who is talking there, but then you add a little more value through animations and support that you can give in terms of multimedia. Another way to leverage your experts is to help them deliver better virtual sessions. And today, in the environment that we live in today, it is even more important, So these are just, a couple of examples of helping prepare better presentations, because just the design can be so much more engaging and confidence building, and communicate that very well to the participants. So the expert is really an expert, but at the same time, they may not be the best in designing great PowerPoints that can be used for the VILT. So just a quick couple of examples there. So that brings us to the third part, which is the after. How do we support performance? So here, after the event, the so-called event is over, maybe we need to look at practice, role plays, something like this, maybe where you are having, a conversation with a customer, and you choose a response, and then based on that, the customer responds back with a new video, and that is branching of the videos that's happening in the background. And so you get a real life experience of negotiating or discussing with the customer on anything. This one is on over deployment of licenses. Coaching is a huge part of any sales enablement initiative. In fact, some experts say you should spend almost 50% time in coaching, shadow calls where, you are supporting a senior executive, just watching, etc. Or when you do it, actual calls or visits, you have somebody who's watching you and giving you feedback, or you give video practice, where you can. So something like this is not exactly fitting into the sales situation, but just this one where, you're discussing with so there is a video that loads and you record yourself, and then you listen to yourself and see what do you feel. And maybe you can try it a few times before you submit that answer. and then maybe the expert can give you feedback or maybe have a call with you to modify it. Now, what you're having there is multiple takes. So you are yourself not satisfied with your own takes. So you do 3, 4, 5. For the webinar that we had sponsored, the expert there, Matthew, was talking on an average in their organization, the retakes were 7. So anybody who uploaded their own audio or video for evaluation, they actually did it, they recorded 7 times. And that's great practice. So you are improving yourself when you are submitting something. It's like submitting a portfolio, and then you have a conversation with a coach. So that's pretty powerful if you can leverage it in sales training. Just-in-time performance support is equally good, and this is something which or equally important. You may have a large repository of products, and people may forget a few things, and last moment they need to check a few things. And this will be more around the products training rather than skills training. But if you can provide just in time, just enough on any device, bite-sized searchable repository like this one. So this is like short 5-minute nuggets, which you can go and search in your LMS quickly through your mobile, and you can launch it on your mobile and just watch those 2-3 things, which will give you exact details of that particular product or maybe the feature, depending on the keywords that you have tagged in. And the final element is analytics, which is how do you really close the loop? That's very, very important. And that's where we started from. When I said for designing anything which is good enough for training, let's begin with the end in the mind, or from the end, if I can call it. Here is a great example of how one of our clients is doing it. They are into, apparels, and what they're doing is they are capturing data, learning data from the LMS, and they can do it by country, by city, by store, by person. They can just, slice and dice the way they want it. And at the same time, they also have similar data coming from the CRM. So essentially, a person is doing so much of training and is selling so much. A store, average completions are so much and they're selling so much. A city, etc., etc. You get the idea. But very interesting thing is they are able to correlate these two data. And just for the very uninitiated ones, if you get correlation which is even here, it's a pretty fantastic correlation. Anything slightly lesser is also fine. This is completely not correlated. There is not a good correlation, but this one is good. 0.9, 0.99 is perfect. I should say that correlation doesn't mean causation, but such correlation over a period of time is a good indicator of how your training is impacting the business, and that's huge, because that's where I think we've been really missing the point for the whole L&D, not just for sales training. So that's almost a wrap, a slide which captures all the points that we had mentioned for the before, event, and after. And we'll open it up for any Q&A, any questions that you may have. Do we have an example of a learning journey? Yeah, I hope the pronunciation is correct. Loena. I will just go back to that screen. So there could be different, perspectives on the journey that you may call it. In the context of, let's say, the LXPs that we are seeing rising, and that's where possibly that term is more prominent. This is essentially a journey which is gamified. It is going to carry on for some time, and there is content that keeps getting populated on a regular basis. It is planned that way. It is not a journey that you can define the time frame of, but it is closer to possibly a journey that the way we understand it. But the ones that maybe the world understands these days, if it is related to an LXP, then those are essentially content chunks that people like us would create, which would then help our customers create a journey. We are working with a client who's looking at optimizing their channels on different topics. They've implemented an LXP, and that's where we are possibly getting in to help. Does that answer? So there's an anonymous question about what's been our most successful sales training initiative. What are the challenges and how did we address them? I think the biggest challenge that we have faced is, I can't really tell you the name of the client where it has been it's a insurance sector client, and the challenge that we have faced is that there are multiple people at their end. Of course, they come with their own expectations about how a particular program should be, and it takes a lot of effort to really convince what kind of a solution will work best. So I think how we have really addressed that is to be patient and continue to give examples of maybe from other domains, from other clients that we may have worked with, to convince that solutions like this will eventually work and will do a great justice to the kind of requirement they have. All right. Any other questions? How do we see sales training will change post COVID-19? So I think very clearly, first of all, it is going to become virtual, as we are all seeing that happening. In a way, there is a openness on the client side as well. That's what my experience is for video calls and chats and web meetings, which may not have been so easy earlier because people definitely preferred to meet in person more and more. But that's changing on both sides because of the necessity that it has brought in. Sales will be very difficult in certain domains for sure. Industries are really getting destroyed, if not disrupted. So I think it is going to shape up gradually. But I think the biggest change that is happening is going to get more and more virtual. The sales itself and a lot of sales training. In fact, one of the data points in the ATD State of Sales Training Report was that the most popular method of sales training is still ILT. And I do see that getting transformed to VILT in a hurry, and over shorter term, not immediately, but over shorter term, getting converted to better learning programs, which are more digital and less face-to-face. All right. I think we have another 10 minutes, but if there are no other questions, we will wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.